right question to be asking. And the way I'd approach the question, the solution to it is to say, okay, why am I expanding internationally? What reason is that for? Okay, let's take that, do that internationally, and then the rest, let's find common resources to help us address. And so I don't know if that framework's going to work in all cases, but if we're expanding internationally because we have, we need a sales team over there, okay, we're going to build a sales team over there, but the rest of it, let's try to either do it in the US, or let's find somebody else that's done it before, or let's share a building with another portfolio company, or what can we do so that we don't have to address every single question every single time?
I think that makes sense. And so I'll share the love and do a shameless plug for High Street Partners as well. One of our sponsors today. It's a lot of things that they do as well around the world. Is they do provide a lot of sort of that back office support and advice, and for many countries around the world. So a High Street Partners organization like High Street Partners perhaps is one here in the U.S. so you can help get some advice and guidance around the world. So, okay, yes.
Can you address the healthcare industry? Do any of you have experience with that? And if you do, could you differentiate between whether or not you have experience with companies that needed regulatory approvals, such as FDA or EU, and those that did not? When you answer your question, if you have any examples.
Healthcare companies.
We're no longer investing in healthcare companies, but we used to, and so we do have several companies that have gone to Europe to get drug approval because it's easier. It seems to be the easier path than the US FDA, but it's a very challenging market, but it just seems to be less stringent. And actually, we have a couple of companies we're selling in Europe, and it's not even yet, we're not even in like phase 2 in the US. So it's just an unusual situation, and it's a challenge from a venture standpoint because it takes a lot of money and time.
Do you have
as you
any
may know.
experience with companies that are health tech, so thus, and do not need FDA approval?
No, we don't really have any health tech companies. We just have pure healthcare companies that have drugs or devices.
So I don't have any personal experience, but our firm, we have a fairly sizable healthcare practice, and what I think they found is that it's so, for a startup, it's so complicated to deal with one regulatory regime that you pick one. And so if that's HIPAA compliance with a health tech product, that's what they're focused on solving for. And then, much later down the line would they think about, adapting that to a different regulatory structure.
That's why healthcare is so hard, though. Candidly, it's why we don't do it at Accel. Here in the U.S., we can't even understand the healthcare laws in our own country, let alone outside the U.S. So it's that one for sure. I would say talk to some good people on.
Fantastic. Next, yeah, right up here.
Yeah. So the topic is valuation of the company, and the question is, does the aggressiveness of the international expansion intrinsically add to the valuation of the company as perceived by private investors and or acquirers, or is it just top line and bottom line data?
For me, I think it depends. To be honest, it's all about execution. If you go out and sell a lot globally and you establish good presence, then yeah, I absolutely think it can enhance value. But at the same time, an office that becomes a cost center and you're not executing on is probably going to hurt your value more than anything else. That's a lot of headache for an acquirer or an investor to come in and deal with. No one wants to go shut down an office with all the different labor laws that are out there and thinking about severance payments and everything else. It gets really, really tricky. So just being there and giving it a try, I don't think does absolutely anything for valuation other than add complexity, and you really have to go out and execute on it, in my opinion.
Where it might be a positive input to valuation is in demonstrating the size of the addressable market, and specifically around if you're dealing with a market size where people aren't sure how much of your product you're going to sell, to be able to demonstrate that there's another market, internationally or in some specific other set of countries, and that you're effectively addressing it, might answer that one question. Otherwise, I don't think it's that big a factor in the valuation process, other than talking about what future potential there may be.
Yeah, that's where I've seen it, was the market size. Is if a company's gotten to a certain size in revenue, 200 million, this is more in the public company, but we may still have a holding in the company where they're 200 million in revenue and they're 25 million internationally. It just tells you that there's plenty of space, and they're showing really nice growth internationally. It just shows you that there's still plenty of white space for the company to continue to grow. So I think it just helps investors think that the market can be even bigger. So that's the one positive, but it does has all the costs, and you have to show that you're getting a return on your investment. So one thing I like to see on that is companies do individual P&Ls for the international offices fully loaded to really understand what their cost structure is and if it's economical.
Yeah, I think, intrinsically, there isn't anything particular that increases valuation just by being international. To me, it would be a matter of understanding why you are international. In other words, you go back to the point you made a couple of times did it make the right sense for your business? Are you international and you're losing money by being international, or are you making money by being international? And so it's more a matter of, can you prove that by doing that you understand your business and you're able to scale and to apply what you've learned domestically internationally? So it's more a matter of, did it make sense for you to do that? And as a management team, do you understand your business? Are you executing it the right way?
Right. Back here?
Yeah. I have a question about the timing of international expansion, specifically to the problem of copycats. What I mean is, like, for every successful, American company, there's usually a few local companies with the same value proposition and same business plan. Take over the local market before you can expand internationally. I'm based in Greater China, so we see this problem all the time. I like to ask, what's your take on your companies that you invest in? Do you want them to expand before, just to take over the market before some local copycats do, or would you rather, invest in local copycats or anything?
It's a really good question, but I don't think you can make that too big a factor in your analysis, because it's got to be intrinsic to you about whether you're ready to go international or not. And so if you have a compelling, you're pioneering something new that's different and it's very compelling, where you're going to get copied.
Actually, from your perspective, from an investor perspective, where you're doing global management, do you want them to expand to take over the local market, or would you prefer to have them, safely at home develop first?
Sorry, say that last part again?
No, it's just a question of timing. Like, if you see a local copycat in that market, would you want your portfolio companies to expand to that market, even prematurely, just to take over the market before the local copycat can?
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is the key word there was prematurely. I would say no.
Okay.
It may be a factor,
Yeah.
and it may accelerate things, but you never want to do it prematurely.
All right. Thanks.
Yes. Great. Yes.
So, question that I have is, usually I remember last time I ran our CRM, we are a 2.5-year-old company, API-based, call-based, and we have paid customers in more than 150 countries, but, right, when you actually drill down to the data, then it's very tempting to, try to let's take over the world, right, let's dominate everything. And then there's that moment where you start doing the investigation, right, that you use the Twilio example. I think, we as a company relate a lot to that as well. But then there's that board meeting where everybody's sitting down, it's like, okay, let's do this. Let's actually start the office, have the lawyers, grab the accounts, do everything else. So you guys mentioned all of the times data points, right? Testing landing pages, different currencies. What are the data points that you look at when you need to pull the trigger?
Tell them who your investors are first.
Oh yeah, so full disclosure, Bessemer, Ethan sits on our board.
So I'll pass.
I think for me, it's a lot of demand data, right? Let's look at the traffic. Let's look at our ability to actually, have we tested, have we transacted commerce in this area? Have we set up the right mechanisms even to take payments in other geographies from an infrastructure perspective? So those are the key data points for me. Have we done everything to lay the foundation to go international? Point one. Is our business scalable? Can we do it? Point two, do we feel that the demand trends are there and that we're leaving money on the table? And then three is, do we have a great business domestically right now? We're not going to screw this up by doing it. Those are kind of the three things that I'd want to talk about within the board meeting. But if you see that demand and if it's happening, absolutely. I think I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier than it was 10 years ago to go international and do these different types of things. There's so many different applications and service providers that have been set up from a technology perspective to make that a reality. So taking advantage of that, I do think is important.
I think what makes the analogy so applicable to Twilio and SendGrid specifically is the same processes apply, both in terms of how people use the product and in terms of how the marketing, how the support, all the different elements of the supporting infrastructure of the business apply so well. And you would know better than I would, but they seem to apply so well in all the different countries around there. Now, Twilio has some specific carrier issues and has to have the ability to route calls in certain places, but with SendGrid, the email infrastructure is the same. And so it seems like there it's a very easy decision to make, whereas in a lot of other companies it's a lot harder.
Yeah, I think the more, we look, I've done meetups and drink cups in multiple countries, and the more we want people just using international credit cards, until we actually pull the trigger. But then there's that moment that, I think that we're going to start doing that, and I was just curious to learn more about your thought process. I'm not stupid.
That's great. All right, I think we probably have time for one more, so making a great question there in the back.
Kind of building on both questions before on the kind of make or buy decisions. So you want to internationalize, timing is probably right, but from an investor point of view, would you say the criteria to put up additional capital to buy companies abroad rather than build yourself or international yourself from the inside? Disclosure, maybe I'm running a mobile network based out of Singapore. So.
Yeah, I think I said this earlier. Actually, most of the companies that I work with actually look to buy first. But obviously it comes down to how big is the company, how much capital they have in the balance sheet, and then is there something they want to acquire? In a couple of cases, it worked really, really well where they made the acquisition. This was both ExactTarget and Premature made international acquisitions, and it just helped leapfrog them. But oftentimes they were sub 20 people, they were small, they weren't the big acquisitions. But I would say the companies looked to do much bigger acquisitions, just didn't find things that were the right fit. But I think they always have looked at acquisitions first because it just gets them there faster. But we all know the risk with acquisitions. There's a huge failure rate, so you want to be conscious of that. So I think the ones that worked the best were the ones that were either kind of quite small. Either it was like a small product feature, or they were doing what they were already doing, and they just wanted to get the customers and the people and move the customers over onto their platform. But I think acquisitions makes a ton of sense if the math works.
And maybe the only thing I'd add is ExactTarget and companies get the scale, they can actually execute on acquisitions, they have the capital to do so. I think for small companies, try before you buy would be the advice. Try to partner, try to work with these guys, try to really get a sense of the technology before you do so, try to understand the people that you're going to be working with, and chances are if you can't get a partnership to work, it's going to be a really tough M&A deal to pull off as well. And I think to the extent which you are trying to be frugal and mindful of your capital, that may be the best option at that time.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining this evening. Hopefully this was a good event and educational, and please join me in thanking our panelists tonight as well.